Mr. Nyman, China is the world's largest economy, has access to capital, sizable reserves to meet its own domestic development needs. China continues to borrow billions of dollars from multilateral development banks. In 2016, China met the criteria for graduation from the World Bank. Since then, China has received $9 billion from the World Bank, $7.6 billion from the Asian Development Bank, and China obtains sizable loans. It's engaging in predatory lending, likely using that money to developing countries across the world. So China is now the world's largest official creditor, even though it continues to get all of this money from a lot that the United States has been putting into these organizations. The United States, I think, has a duty to make sure the U.S. taxpayer resources are going to countries that need it most, not China. A dollar lent to China is a dollar not available for a project to eliminate poverty in the developing world. The multilateral development banks need to focus on their development mission. So what's your strategy to end lending to China at multilateral development banks?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I do agree that our MDB efforts and development finance should be targeting the lowest income countries that need that assistance. And China has, as you said, by that standard graduated for years ago now. If confirmed, I would be committed to working with the executive directors and understand the best way forwards to achieve that outcome, which I agree with, Senator. I also, if confirmed, would be happy to discuss the efforts with you and your staff.
Great. Thank you. Another question, Mr. Nyman. There are currently 840 million people across the globe with no electricity, none right now, today. People who live in poor and developing nations want and need a stable energy supply to grow their economy, to improve their lives. Energy is, I believe, a single critical tool to help countries alleviate poverty. The United States should be working to promote an all-of-the-above energy strategy. But the World Bank and many of the multilateral development banks are restricting lending for traditional energy projects. No modern economy can run on only renewable power, which we know is variable. A country needs continuous, abundant energy to run a manufacturing plant, a data center, or a hospital. I mean, I think of some of my travel to Africa, we're talking to hospital staff, and their biggest issue is lack of power when it comes to maternal death, but the death of the baby as well during delivery. So, I think these restrictions in the lending only exacerbates the global inequities of energy. In fact, all of Africa, with a population of 1.3 billion people, accounts for a little more than 3% of the total global electricity generation. If Africa tripled its electricity consumption based on only natural gas, it'd still be less than 1% of the annual global emissions footprint. So if you care about people in developing countries, and we all do, we'd help to turn the lights on. So if confirmed, will you commit to ensuring that multilateral development banks are promoting all forms of energy projects across the globe, including oil, gas, and coal?
Senator, the President and the Secretary have both described the climate change as an existential threat, and that's an assessment that I wholeheartedly agree with. I think the way to think of the cost in terms of energy and infrastructure that burns carbon, emits carbon, is not just the cost today, but also the cost to the future. And so I think it's appropriate and important for our efforts through the multilateral development banks on development financing per se to emphasize cleaner infrastructures that support our goals on climate change.
Well, I'll take that as a direct attack against these people who are desperately looking for energy to survive today, because that's a decision. This administration, I know it's not your position, but it's the administration's position, which, for the existence of those alive today in these communities, you take a look at the #1 cause of death, environmental death, it's household indoor smoke for cooking. Period. No questions asked that's the concern, and I believe it's an affront to these people and an insult for the administration to have such a position. So at the UN, President Biden announced he would once again double U.S. contributions to international climate change. In April, he pledged to increase contributions for global climate financing to $5.7 billion. So this means that since he just said he's going to double it, that's at $11.4 billion a year. This is happening at a time American people are facing significant challenges at home. Communities across the nation are just emerging from a deadly pandemic. We're dealing with stifled economies, soaring debt, declining infrastructure. Front page story of the New York Times today, people under inflation are looking at the largest increase in prices and costs for Thanksgiving dinner. This is the New York Times front page today. But whether it's the Green New Deal, the UN Green Climate Change Slush Fund, the American people cannot afford these disastrous policies. So please explain why American taxpayers should support borrowing more from countries like China in order to send it overseas to international bureaucrats in the name of climate change. And I hope to hear more about that. It's an existential threat.
Senator, this isn't an easy situation. It's, of course, I just want to acknowledge, of course, it's a difficult issue, but we have trade-offs that we have to consider, and I agree with the assessment that time is running out. It is really important that we do all that we can to decarbonize the planet, and I think as such, it is appropriate to emphasize sustainable infrastructure projects through our development financing policies.